Eyes open. I was trying to steer. Yeah, couldn't do it.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you are doing well. This is Nick Liebert with Exit Realty. We know we have a lot of people that are going to be signing on the next couple minutes. I see we've got our panelists of experts here with us as well. So we'll be starting with them in a second. I'll give them an introduction. So we'll give everybody about a minute or so to log on, and then we'll get started.
That's going to do me right. So there's something that I sit here and I look at the players, whether
I have gone ahead and muted everybody. I am going to go ahead and unmute, actually ask our guest speakers to unmute themselves as well. So if they could go ahead and unmute themselves, everybody else is muted. We will have Q&A at the end of this. We are going to be doing that. So if you've got questions, you can ask them in the question box. And then we will be answering those, reading those, and answering those towards the end. And in addition to that, we will also be opening up, you can open up your mics and ask questions at the end as well, directly if you want to ask them live. So it is now 6:01. We will go ahead and get started. This is being recorded. We do these Money Mondays calls, we call them, or webinars and Zooms every Monday at Exit Strategy Realty. We want to make sure that our agents have the best information. We do them in the evenings to catch both our part-time agents, our busy agents with families, and then also record it for our agents that are out on showings at this time. But we do these every Mondays in addition to all our trainings. And once a month, we're going to be opening these up to you, the Realtor community. So look in your emails and on our social media feeds for the continuation of this series, the public version for realtors, real estate professional friends in our markets that we serve. So we're excited about this. Tonight, what we're focusing on is twofold. Number one, we have all the questions going on in the market right now about short sales and foreclosures. Is there going to be a crash? Are there going to be a lot more foreclosures? When are those foreclosures, if there are going to be any more, and when there's going to be more, when they're going to hit the market due to the moratoriums? How does this also affect short sales? And so the short sale market is going to be another question. When that moratorium is lifted, are we thinking we're going to see more short sales than foreclosures because of market conditions and inventory being so tight? Are consumers being educated properly as to their options so their property doesn't go all the way through the foreclosure process? And I couldn't think of better experts to have on tonight than our friends at Cadillus and Associates. I want them in a second to introduce themselves, but they are the preeminent law firm handling foreclosures, doing a lot of that activity. They've represented asset management companies and banks. You may remember their name, particularly at the height of the foreclosure crisis and ongoing after that. They've been huge players in the market, huge influencers and experts. And so it's an honor to have them on this evening. Before I do introduce them, I want to also let you know that after that conversation with our panel discussing those issues, I'm going to have a brief presentation to you, some research I've done on the ShowingTime controversy, what's going on with Zillow and ShowingTime, some options for you, some things to consider, some data points on that. So that will come directly from me. But without further ado, I want to turn it over to our experts tonight, and I'd love to have them introduce themselves and start off our conversation.
Thanks, Nick. How you doing tonight? It's Bill Lenig with Strategic Title. I've got Adam Cadillus, who's the president of Cadillus and Associates, and Greg Moody, who's one of the key partners with Cadillus and Associates too. So I'll let Adam start, just kind of giving a quick intro about Cadillus and who they are, just so everybody could get caught up to speed with.
Sure, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Nick and Exit Realty, for having us tonight. We really appreciate it. We've been around since 1977. We used to be a general practice law firm, and probably about in the early 80s, we started narrowing in on representing creditors, specifically banks, servicers, credit unions, investors. We've been in a number of different states over the years, but our current footprint is Illinois, Texas, Missouri, Indiana, and Wisconsin. We also own title companies in those states. In addition to doing creditors work and default work, we do a lot of real estate transactions, title work, retail type closings. I've been with the firm in different capacities for about 20 years. I'm practicing law with the firm for about 11 years. And this is my partner, Greg Moody.
How you doing? Yeah, Greg Moody. I partner with the 5 states, as Adam mentioned. I've been with the firm since 1991, and as Bill Wennick said to me, he's like, "Man, were you like 9 years old when you started?" I said, "Yeah, I was a foreclosure savant." So, but I'll talk in a minute here. But I also want to introduce Jennifer Moses, our supervising attorney, who a lot of you may know. She's the brains behind it. She does a lot of the closings for the agents and clients, and does a great job. So, Jen, you want to say hi? Oh, I'm sorry. We're gonna put Jen on. I'm sorry, Jen. Just wave. Jen's been practicing for about how many years? Put fingers up. 15 years, probably 10, 15 years, right? She does a great job. She's been with us for a number of years. Previously with a title company, but maybe later we can have her chime in. But
She's actually unmuted, so she can go ahead.
There you go.
Hey, I'm Jen. Good evening, everybody. I'm the supervising attorney over at Cadillus and handling the REO as well as the private deal transaction. So I've been there since 2012, been practicing since 2006.
Good deal. And one of the things, Nick, I like to let all the agents know is we're here to help answer when you have an oddball question. We don't charge extra for it. We feel all we have for our clients is our expertise. So doing a lot of foreclosure and litigation, we do more real estate litigation and real estate appeals than probably almost every other firm combined doing this stuff at the appellate court. I mean, we've got a lot of cases that we've handled. So we've seen a lot of situations and usually can give you advice to help your clients out. So never hesitate to reach out to us if you have any question. We'll do our best to help you out. So, okay.
Yeah, so we just wanted to start off the evening just kind of going over a quick recap of what's been going on with the foreclosure moratoriums, how that's going to affect REOs, how it's going to affect short sales, and just kind of put things into perspective of what happened in the Great Recession. And we get a lot of questions, is that going to happen again? So we're trying to educate the market, educate the agents, and kind of let them know, like, from our experience here at Cadillus, since we've gone through this unfortunate situation, where do we think things are going to be going in the future so far. So I know Greg wanted to start off talking about the moratorium so far.
Sure. So I was definitely heavily involved in the foreclosure world during the subprime foreclosure crisis that we had years ago. And from my perspective, I think this situation's a lot different. As many of you will know that have been in the real estate market for a long time. Back then we had, I want to say it was like worldwide mortgage, like 125% mortgages. There was no appraisal value for properties, where there was questions with the appraisers coming in and appraising properties higher than what they were really worth and what you could really sell it. So I think this will be different. And I want to give you a little background, kind of where we are in the foreclosure world and what we're able to do as a law firm. So the foreclosure moratorium took place, started in March of 2020. So we're almost a year into that. And what happened is there's really 4 major players. You've got Fannie Mae, Federal National Mortgage Association, and Freddie Mac. Those are 2 of the what we call government-sponsored entities. Then you have the FHA, which is a part of Housing and Urban Development, which is more of a affordable housing. They're involved in a lot of the investing in affordable housing for people. And then we also have private loans. So right now, the moratoriums that are currently in place impact Fannie, Freddie, and HUD, but that's about 70% of the whole market. So right now, the HUD, President Biden came out and said he's staying foreclosures, I mean, based all action on occupied foreclosures through the end of June. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac currently are out to March 31st with their moratorium. So they're not quite in sync right now as far as timing, but my hunch is they'll probably more likely than not walk in step and continue it. But that, I think, all depends on the rollout of the vaccine and how we're getting more back to a normal way of life. So let's see. One of the things that we are able to move on from a foreclosure perspective is either vacant or abandoned properties. So those, we're filing them. But just to give you a sense of volume, I kind of ran some numbers, sweet numbers from Cook County. This is just Cook County. In 2019 and 2020, up until February of 2020, there were average filings between 800 and 1,000 foreclosures every single month in Cook County. Since then, so if you start in April when we were first full month of the moratorium, you're averaging roughly 150 foreclosures a month. So those have dropped dramatically. Private lenders are allowed to proceed because they're not governed by the Fannie and Freddie or HUD if they're not insured by those. But they've been real hesitant, a lot of private, because they don't want to get the bad publicity because of, of all the issues we were going with COVID-19. However, we're starting to see more of them loosening up a little bit. But regardless, at the end of the day, until the full moratorium is lifted, I think it's going to be a really slow foreclosure market. And the one thing most of you probably know is Illinois is a pretty slow foreclosure process relative to other states. By example, Illinois on average, it's going to be about, and this is a really rather uncontested file, it's about a year to complete a foreclosure. Whereas in a state next door, Missouri, it's a non-judicial process. They're done within maybe 60 days. So what we're looking at is once the moratorium is lifted, from our discussion with clients, I don't think it's going to be like the subprime where they just throw you a lot, they file a ton of foreclosure cases. I feel like they're still working with borrowers, but if you look at, roughly, 10,000 foreclosures in Cook County you would have had in a normal year, and you really only had, maybe 10 to 15% of those numbers, there's still going to be a good deal of foreclosures. And I always look at it this way: foreclosures really are dictated by obviously how aggressive the lending practices are of lenders, but the unemployment rate that really drives foreclosures in the long run. And going into March of 2020, we were probably the lowest unemployment rate in all of our lives. So now the unemployment rate's higher. It's yet to be seen where things will be this summer when hopefully we're able to start filing foreclosures. And really, I think one of the reasons foreclosures helps the market is if borrowers aren't making mortgage payments, then they're just sitting on the house. And we already know right now the inventory is very, very low. And if you're able to file foreclosure for those folks that just aren't making payments and aren't trying to get some type of restructure or forbearance agreement, you're basically prolonging the inevitable in a sense. And once you file the foreclosure, that really kind of prompts a borrower to say, oh, I got to take some action. But right now, there's really nothing, holding someone's feet to the fire to move and to do so, move on and say, hey, I need to work it out, or I need to list this house because it's really beyond my means. I can't afford the house anymore. So again, based on my experience from doing this for 30 years, I think once the moratorium gets lifted, you're going to see more potential clients that say, you know what, I was able to kind of hold on to my house because they really weren't pushing for payments. Now they are. I want to talk about potentially selling the house. So we think from our discussion with clients, you're going to see more of that stuff. So there'll be a little bit more inventory, I think. So in terms of short sales, just my office, I polled one of my managers before this meeting tonight, just to ask them kind of what's the landscape look like in terms of short sales. And right now we have a way of tracking all of our what we call loss mitigation holds, which would be short sales, deed in lieu, workouts, forbearance plans, all that stuff. We have in our office over 800 files on hold, but only 22 of those are on hold for a potential short sale. And I think that's obviously for a few reasons. I think one of the major reasons is, as you all know, housing prices keep going up. I mean, we have had more bidding wars than we've probably ever seen in Illinois, especially in a lot of the suburbs. So we're really not seeing that push on forbearances. Now, again, that can change. In our discussion preparing for this, we were talking about, maybe 2023, you're going to see, the housing prices start to level off. And, that again could be something that you'll start seeing more short sales being more popular.
That's great. Now, we're, compared to the last Great Recession, what kind of numbers were you guys doing in
Sure.
Illinois,
Mhm.
for example?
So you would see in Illinois, I remember I told you on an average year, there was about 1,000 foreclosures in Cook County. Back when, during the subprime, you were seeing easily 2,500 or 3,000 foreclosures a month filed in Cook County alone. So that was, the numbers were really high. So again, I don't see that happening in this situation. I see personally, because of the fact that there hasn't been any foreclosures in a year, I could see for, a 6-month period, you could see maybe, 1,500, 1,700 foreclosures a month in Cook County. And then it more levels off. And I think long-term, the foreclosure numbers will be, predicated on what the unemployment rates look like. So I think that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, sounds good. Adam, you had some data points that you wanted to reach on.
Yeah, so, just how does Illinois compare to the rest of the country when it comes to defaults? Well, I first wanted to say, if you're ever looking for some good data along these lines for defaults and whatnot, whether it be local, state, or national, some sources that I like to go to and check out that are good, one being Black Knight. They have a lot of good data. Black Knight is actually a company that owns the operating systems for the largest lenders and servicers in the country. They're based out of Jacksonville, Florida. They almost pretty much have a monopoly on the systems that clients are using. So they have a ton of good data. And they have a monthly call that goes over the trending rates and all that. I believe they also have information that you could purchase. I also like Realty Track. They have a lot of good data as well. Also has some free data and data that you could purchase. And then locally, I like following IllinoisPolicy.org. I think they have a lot of good local data. Illinois historically is one of the top 5 places for defaults in the country, top 5 highest rates. And I'm sure you guys could infer why. I mean, given the history of our state government recently, foreclosures take a long time here, so that's part of the reason why there's so many of them. Questionable government leadership here locally, high taxes. Let's see, what else did we have here? So typically Illinois as well. You guys know all the problems that we've had in Illinois and continue to have. But that's part of the reason why it leads to high default rates. But also typically, Illinois is 8 to 10% of the country's defaults. So that's pretty large, compared to the rest of the country. If you look at Florida, for example, that state has the largest amount of defaults. And that typically is about 50% of the country's defaults, which I thought was a pretty large statistic there. So, yeah.
So we wanted to also talk about the proposed legislation that President Biden is coming out with and kind of get our take on, what the different measures might be on that. Greg had some information on that.
Sure.
$15,000 first-time homebuyer credit. Nick, you could chime in too to see, is that something that would actually help right now with being such a low inventory? So, I'll let Greg take that
Sure.
first one.
So, yeah, thank you, Bill. Really interesting. I think that one of the things that President Biden put in the stimulus package was a $15,000, what they term a first-time home buyer credit, which would be not on your April tax return, but literally a $15,000 check you could use towards your down payment at closing. And they liberally construe what a first-time home buyer is. It's anyone who has not owned a home for 3+ years would qualify under this. So it'll be interesting to see whether this passes, and it might be something, Nick, that we could have a more further. If it does, I think it would be a nice additional topic. But one of the stumbling blocks is it's in the large stimulus bill. And I think as of last week, President Biden says, hey, I'm not going to agree to a $50,000 student loan, release, or I'm only going to agree to like a $10,000. So that could be a stumbling block. So they're talking about whether or not that they'll actually get this through. So it's a little bit up in the air. And I think, as Bill pointed out, it's interesting in terms of timing. One of the things President Biden's really pushing for is more FHA loans because that's the affordable housing wing of the government. But by allowing a $15,000 credit, I think that's just going to increase the sales price of homes, at least in the short term, and especially when the inventory is so low. So it'll be interesting to see where that passes. I think one of the key takeaways is that if you have clients that are, haven't bought on, they're kind of on the, on the fence of what they want to do, it's a nice thing to say, hey, listen, we can keep in touch. I'll let you know if this passes into law, because this would be a great opportunity for you to start looking at homes if you're going to have $15,000 of, potentially free money coming your way. And I think it still goes back, the inventory issue goes back to the interplay with the foreclosures, because if we have, once you start filing foreclosures, I think you're going to get more people listing homes that are just kind of sitting there and just say, hey, I can live in here free for as long as I want until there's a little bit more heat on me. So they might go hand in hand once that passes, but it's not a slam dunk right now. I think there's a really good chance that something like this passes, but I think the stimulus bill will probably get modified some way, shape, or form. You just don't know which one becomes a victim when they do the modifications.
Right, exactly. And then we wanted to talk about, the different types of loan products. Greg mentioned FHA. I know Adam had some information on default rates for the FHA product too that mentioned.
So I'm going to kind of give, some stats here. The section we kind of had is 2021 and beyond predictions. So the government's always a wild card, right? In the last foreclosure crash, the government was a wild card that came out with HAMP products, the modification products, and that probably knocked off about half of what the total foreclosure volume would have been. But as if any of you guys practiced during that time, you know that it was still a very large volume. So I wanted to start by citing some 2019 Illinois foreclosure numbers. And why I think that's important is because this will help put in perspective of the numbers that I'm going to cite that are more current to date. But 2019 was a record low year for foreclosures. The average default rate across the country in a normal market, usually about 1% of all mortgages are in default. 2019, the national average was half of 1%. So historically low foreclosure volumes. Also, you had record, lows for the unemployment rate. So the market we had a really good market going, and then COVID hit. So 2019, for example, there was 335,000 foreclosures filed in the country. In Illinois, in 2019, there was 31,000 foreclosures filed. That was the second largest in the country in 2019. So some other numbers I wanted to cite. Through the foreclosure crash, the previous crash, the highest year for foreclosures was 2012. And 106,000 foreclosures were filed in Illinois. And at that time period, the unemployment rate was 9.6%. What is it currently? About 6.5%, 7%? Maybe around there?
Yeah, that's right.
So from 2007 to 2016 in Illinois, which is about a 10-year period there was 267,000 total foreclosures filed. So that kind of gives you a basis of 2019, a lower than lower than normal year. That's kind of where we were at. And one thing that I did want to state, this is kind of an aside, but I think it's an interesting point. When I was running these numbers, we looked at, and Greg cited to our loss mitigation area earlier, 75% of the cases that we filed in 2019 didn't make it all the way through foreclosure. So I thought that was a pretty big stat. And what that means is that there was some type of workout, loss mitigation. So whether they reinstated the loan, they filed a loan modification, they sold the property, whatever, all these different options. So I thought that was a really interesting stat. That's kind of an aside. But I wanted to get to kind of where we're at in the current numbers across the country, and then what we may see in Illinois coming. So is there going to be the same kind of foreclosure volume when the moratorium lifts? It's definitely going to be higher. So, there hasn't been really any foreclosures moving since March. of 2020. And, you know, even though we were in record levels, there was still a lot in the pipeline. So the only thing that's been moving is vacant and abandoned. So you have all that backlog building just normally there. So as of November of this past year, 5.5% of all mortgages were in forbearance. And I thought another interesting statistic there was 76% of those people extended their forbearances. So what that means is, you know, the highest that it was last year was actually in March of 2020 when they rolled out the CARES Act. You had 8% of all mortgages in the country that went on some type of forbearance. And if you remember, the CARES Act allowed for up to 6 months of forbearance of your loan. And then you could ask for another 6 months on top of that. And then more recently, Fannie and Freddie came out, if you saw in President Biden's announcement, that they extended that an additional 3 months. So you had a lot of people that were taking advantage of that. But the highest that it was on record was in March of 2020, a total of 8%. So that's a lot. Another stat that I thought was interesting, in the second quarter of 2020, of all mortgages in the country, FHA, which you know, kind of is not subprime, but more the lower, you know, lower income, 16% of FHA mortgages in the second quarter of 2020 were in default. I think that's a pretty alarming number. That's almost 1 in 5 FHA mortgages. As for conventional loans, which is private loans, that was about 8%, and Fannie and Freddie was around 8% as well. So how big is the foreclosure backlog? There's currently about 2.7 million loans in forbearance and about 900,000 loans that are in default but are not in forbearance. So that totals about 3.7 million loans that are 30 or more days past due. That's a pretty large number given what I just cited in, you know, Illinois' 2019 numbers. Of those 3.7 million loans that are 30 or more days delinquent, 1.8 million loans are seriously delinquent. That means 90 days or more past due. So a lot of the economists and, you know, data gathering sources like Realty Track are predicting that when the moratorium lifts, they're saying they're going to have about 1.1 million foreclosures, you know, ready to file. Now, how quick can they get those out? How quick do the courts process them? That's another story. But 1.1 million compared to what we had in 2019. So we had 31,000 foreclosures filed in Illinois in 2019, and they're saying they have 1.1 million nationally to send out. Well, if Illinois is typically 8 to 11% of that overall, that would mean that Illinois is sitting ready to send out about 100,000+ foreclosures. So that's 3 times 2019's volumes right there. In talking to a lot of our clients, they're citing around the similar data that they're expecting 2 to 3 times normal foreclosure volumes, which kind of lines up with those numbers. Realty Track cited that in the next 5 years, they believe that there'll be 1.5 to 2 million foreclosures completed in the country. And but like I said previously, the wild card is the government. Who knows what's going to happen in this crash? I didn't think that the moratoriums would go longer than a full calendar year. Currently for Fannie and Freddie, like Greg said, that's set to expire end of March, but FHA has continued out to end of June. So we don't know if Fannie and Freddie is going to follow them or not. That's 70% of the total market, which is government loans. The other 30% is private loans. Those are starting to move in some states, some areas. We have some clients in Illinois that are filing on private loans already. We believe that we're going to continue to see that into the first and second quarter of this year, kind of not following what the government's really doing anymore, especially as the vaccine, you know, continues to get rolled out and the numbers improve. So at some point this year, you're going to see an uptick in filings, but we don't know what's going to happen from a loss mitigation perspective. So I thought those were some interesting numbers.
Definitely. Can I chime in on one thing? Because I know a lot of agents ask the question, how do I become an REO agent, right? How do I get REO work? And REO basically just stands for real estate owned by the bank. So it's when they complete the foreclosures. And we do a lot of that. Obviously, we've done that for a lot of years, and we did it back in the day, the subprime, you know, when that whole crisis was going on, we were heavily involved in that. We were doing, that was when there was not a lot of the traditional closing, there was a lot of those REOs. So right now, since there hasn't been any foreclosures really, you know, or a small number of foreclosures in the past year, right now, clients aren't looking today to bring on new agents to handle REOs. But a state like Illinois, as I mentioned before, takes about a year. So I would think, within, 6 to 9 months after the moratoriums are lifted, the clients are going to start seeing an increase in inventory, and they'll be looking to add agents. Now, it's all supply and demand. I mean, they had, again, I remember back in the day, there were unbelievable amounts of REO agents back in the subprime crisis, and then all of a sudden it trickled down, and only the best survived. And if you're interested in that world, one of the things you really need to look at is it's a lot different than a typical deal where you're going to be dealing with the eviction issues. And it was funny, today I was talking to my eviction manager, and she said she's never seen so many cases where people have moved out or vacated or been evicted and have moved back into the property. So it's becoming, that business is getting tougher and tougher. So, but anyway, from a timeline perspective, I would say 6 to 9 months after the moratorium gets lifted, you'll start seeing these large clients looking to maybe add some more agents to their list of who they send files to.
Yeah, and to add to that, just like on the REO agent side, they decreased their number of vendors over the years, but same thing happened on the law firm side. So we were competing against, our competitions in our states to remain as a vendor. So, and we're seeing on the law firm side, since that's obviously you need to do the foreclosure before you get to the REO, clients are looking to, add some firms again in certain states or other areas, just to make sure that they have the right amount of vendors to handle their capacity, which are predicted to be 2 to 3 the normal rate, like I had said. Also, there's like any business, it's a lot of relationships. There's a lot of conferences that you can go to. Some are more local and regional, some are national. One big one that's a bigger national one is put on by the 5-Star Institute every year in September in Dallas, Texas. And you see real estate agents from across the country gather that do a lot of REO or are trying to meet, asset managers or banks or servicers. And locally, there's a good amount of smaller banks or regional banks or more local banks that sometimes, will work with even more local attorneys, sometimes not us, or even sometimes local real estate agents. So that's another way to kind of get your foot in the door. If you can make relationships with any local investment groups, any local asset management groups, any local, banks, to try to get your, feet wet with doing some REOs. But like Greg said, it's all about supply and demand. And we do think that in the next, probably a year from now, they'll be looking to add, agents. And sometimes they ask us, who are good ones they add. And we hope to be able to help out our partners as much as we can and where we can. So just, stay in touch, and that's about it.
Yeah. So we've done about 30 minutes. Nick, do you want to open up? Is there any questions that any of the agents might want to ask us? We don't want to talk too much.
Well, no, first of all, I appreciate the conversation. I don't see any questions in the question box, but I actually have one for people that are looking to short sell, because here's my prediction on this is that because we've got low inventory, because we have a lot of people buying or trying to buy because of the low interest rates, and you've got a much savvier seller than you did in 2009 and 10 in terms of, back then, nobody knew what to do with their homes. The banks weren't lending. There weren't any classes on short sales. All of that, you saw people just not being very hopeless, feeling like they couldn't do anything to get out of the situation. They would let their homes go to foreclosure. With this being more of a short sale friendly market, people better educated, lenders lending, do you feel like a smart thing for an agent to do would be to target short sales, get that list of distressed properties, make sure that their social media is reflecting that they can help for those types of situations, knowing that I think some of these people are going to be smarter than to allow their property to go all the way to foreclosure?
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yes, I think that, and some of these might be able to be, given that there's good equity in properties right now and the market value is high, some people might be able to sell their properties to pay off almost all their debt, and if not, it might be close there, and clients are going to be looking for any ways to, there's one common misconception is banks, servicers, everybody loses in foreclosures. I mean, the lawyers, we get paid through this, but our clients don't make money. It's a loss leader for them. They don't want to take back homes. They don't want to have to sell homes. They lose throughout the whole process. So now more than ever, I think they kind of learned in the last crash, how to work loss mitigation, how to deal with volume there. They would want to work these out anywhere they can. So I do think it would be smart to try to target, individuals. And if you can get a rate of individuals in the area that are behind, solicit them to try to sell their properties, and if you can get to them, before, to be proactive, I think that would be great.
Yeah, and to kind of echo what Adam said, I think the first thing I think most clients do now, and I agree with Nick, I think borrowers are more savvy, and I think lenders are more fine-tuned things. I think at first short sales were really, really challenging to get through, and I think they've gotten better. But I think step one on the lender side is you submit a contract, they're going to get their own appraiser out there and see what they feel it's like. And if they feel like, hey, the borrower owes 100,000 and I just got an appraisal 125, they're probably not going to do anything with you. But you're right, if it's truly a situation where it's underwater, I think you're going to see clients probably quicker response because they're not getting as many short sales, and they're more likely to agree to, as Adam said, they don't want these houses. That's the last thing they want to do. They want to try to make the best of a bad situation. So I think that's a good idea, Nick.
But the reality is, one more point I wanted to make to a large percentage of people that are in default or heading towards default is, given these moratoriums, this is unprecedented times. A lot of people won't act until kind of forced to act in some respect. So people are a lot more educated, a lot more savvy, and there's nothing really happening right now. So they can't be foreclosed upon for the most part. For the most part, they can't have their property go to sale. They can't be evicted for the most part right now. So there's less urgency to act. I think once the moratoriums lift and you start seeing a flow start to develop again, you're going to see a lot more workouts. And just in our business, just the reality of a lot of what it takes is getting close to that foreclosure, that filing of foreclosure, to really bring people to the table. And that's why, it goes back to that point that I cited, that 75% of our cases settle in some respect. I mean, our loss mitigation, workout area here for our firm is very large. We have a whole, area here that helps borrowers, and we can't give advice, right? Because we represent the lenders, but we are a facilitator between the lender and the borrower. So whole area that we focus on here at our firm, which is something I always like to cite, because a lot of times banks get a bad rap, or people that do foreclosures. I think it's cool that 3/4 of the people were able to help out of a bad financial situation. So
I have a question.
Sure.
So I was, sometimes I'll have a client and we'll look at a foreclosure, and sometimes I'll participate in the purchase. And so recently there was one in Lawndale and Cadillus. You guys were the attorneys on that particular property. And in the agent remarks, it mentioned you guys, but it also had a sentence talking about if you were a broker, you would not get paid a commission if you were part of the transaction in purchasing the property. So I'm not really sure what law that falls under, where a brokerage can keep another broker from earning a commission. And this is a big time REO agent who is doing it. I'm not going to mention names or anything, but definitely one of the big boys in the last crash. So can you talk a little bit about that? Who's allowed to tell who when they can get compensated and when they can't, and what law that would be?
Sure. Well, I just want to, are you speaking of like auction.com by chance, or are you?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to see, because we don't always know what's available out there, if these are auction platforms or not.
Sorry, Adam, was it a situation where they were talking about the broker being the buyer of the property, perhaps?
Yeah, so if I was going to participate in the purchase along with one of my clients, that the broker would not be entitled to a commission. So in other words, if you are a broker buying into an REO, this particular brokerage was saying you're not going to get paid a commission. So I'm looking at license law and that kind of stuff. I just can't find anywhere where it would preclude somebody from a brokerage saying to another brokerage, you're not going to get compensated if you're participating in the purchase. So in other words, can a brokerage tell another broker if they're going to buy an REO, they can't get paid?
I don't think it's so much the broker in that instance, and Greg and Adam, you can jump in. I think that's more of the seller saying that if the broker is the buyer, that they're not going to pay a commission.
Okay, and so I'm just trying to figure out, so obviously at this point it's an REO, so it's bank owned. So where would I find a law where a bank can tell somebody they can't get paid a commission in purchasing their asset? I'm just trying to find out what that's based in. What would be the bank's issue with somebody getting paid?
Sure, got it. So I think Jen's spot on. I don't know if it's a question of the law, but it's a contract. So if you go into a contract with me and the terms are you don't get paid a commission, I'm selling it to you for $100,000, it's more of a contractual thing than a law or statute that's on point on it. Because I mean we can negotiate whatever we want to, and if a
would that not be discriminatory?
Well, no. Let me one more thing I want to do, because some clients get a little leery that they think if a broker's buying it for themselves that have underpriced it, that there's you know what I mean, that you have inside information that they don't. So I think Jen Moses, our supervising attorney, is spot on. It's the particular client, whoever the client is. I haven't seen the situation, so I don't know who specifically you're talking about, but a client can say this is what my rules are.
Yeah, I'd love to actually jump in and help on this because Jordan is the name of the speaker, but I actually believe it's John Zimmer from our office. I think he's logged into somebody else's Zoom.
Yeah,
let me answer that for you.
Because I don't know how I got named Jordan.
No worries. So let me answer that question for you.
Yeah,
Banks by federal law are not allowed to be in the business of real estate. That is a federal law. When I purchased the home that I live in right now, it was a short sale, and then it was eventually a foreclosure by the time I got it. And I looked into the exact same law because I wanted the money, as the buyer's agent. And it is a federal law that banks are not allowed to be in the business of real estate. And their interpretation of that law, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, etc., is that giving a realtor a commission on a property that they are also the buyer coming from the bank leads them at least partially into the business of real estate. So
wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
Whoa. I don't, so that's ironic. So the bank is worried about being in the real estate business because you're getting a commission and purchasing a property they own?
It's a federal law, so you can look that federal law up. That is unfortunately not something that myself, Codillis, or the local brokerages would be able to change. So
okay, yeah,
yep, we're going to move on to our next question. And who else has a question for them? Otherwise, we're going to jump into the Zillow format because I want to make sure we stay on time tonight. Anybody else with a question for foreclosures or short sales for our experts? Go ahead, whoever's speaking.
I have something to bring up. So I don't know if anybody knows, but I have some experience doing some short sales and foreclosures in the past. And what I think is my perspective on what's going on is the forbearance plans are really critical what's going on because Fannie and Freddie have extended the forbearance plans, and I believe what they're going to do is they're anticipating that many of those forbearance plans, people are going to pay off those plans because they have equity in their homes and they can refinance their properties and pay them off or modify their loans. So that reduces the risk to the bank. The other thing is if it is not able to be refinanced and modified, the second alternative that I think the banks are doing is giving deferments. So they're putting those deferments towards the back end of the loans. So many of these distressed properties that we're anticipating may occur may not be actually distress, because they'll be for Fannie and Freddie and Penny Mac and some of the GSEs. But for those banks that are not Fannie and Freddie, that have given forbearance plans, and they're just waiting for these moratoriums to lift, and they don't, like you guys said, they don't even have to do what Fannie and Freddie are doing. They don't have to have a moratorium. If they give a forbearance plan to someone and someone defaults on that, then they have the right to escalate the foreclosure process, and people may not have the option of doing short sales or deed in lieu at all, depending on who these other banks are and what they want to do with these properties. If they see the value of in the property and taking it back as an REO. So those are issues. There are also the other issue. Well, let me put it this way. I think that there are opportunities in the distressed sales, and one of those areas of opportunities I see as if you have an investor that owns investment properties and there is a freeze on evictions of the tenants, investors are hurting badly because they're losing, they're not paying their mortgages. They need that income from tenants to pay those mortgages.
Yeah.
So what are they going to do? They're going to be in default. They're going to get some kind of assistance too, but maybe those people are looking at getting rid of these properties with tenants in place that are not paying rent. So that's an opportunity. That's a niche market that you may want to consider getting into and looking at. The other is, I know that a lot of people in distress right now that are unemployed, that are working for less hours, and marital distress is another way to go about it, because I actually have someone that is a mediator in divorces, and they've contacted me to talk about a family that is in a forbearance plan, divorce situation, and those are opportunities as well.
You make a really good point about the investor. I think that could be another target area, because out of all the help that's been given, there's been the least given to them. Some have been able to apply for PPP loans, if they hold their interest in a business, but they're hurting probably a lot in this. So there's going to be a lot of possible defaults there and a lot of opportunity to target them. But it have to be a really savvy buyer to want to take that on, given when you don't know these moratoriums when they're going to end. And to your other point about the what was this previous point that you were talking about? Oh, I had another comment that I was going to make to that.
Was it forbearance? I was talking about forbearances.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So what they're going to do at first is they're going to put all of that back to amount deferred and put it on the back of the loan, right? So if you could afford to pay again, then it'll be on a go forward basis. And then you would deal with that when you either refinance, like you said, or pay it off. But the next step of that is, once this lifts, if you can't pay, even with that amount being deferred, then they're going to look to modify your loan. And there's still going to be a number of people that may get a modified loan and try to be able to pay that new payment going forward. But there's going to be, I think, a lot of people that just don't have the income.
They don't qualify for the modification because they're not making enough money like they were before the pandemic.
And then,
less hours. Now here's another issue, is that there may be people that you may be unemployed or working less hours that have equity in their homes, and they're in a forbearance plan. And they, rather than having that, paying off that forbearance later on and eating up their equity in the property, they may want to preserve their equity and sell their homes sooner than later, and get into something that's less expensive for them to live
Yes.
in.
Right.
I agree.
I did
That's
this
a good
work,
point.
a man out in California that was living in a house, and he had a forbearance plan, and he was worried about paying off the balance of the plan after it was, the forbearance period ended, and he decided to sell the property and retain the equity that he had for himself, as opposed to giving that equity up to the bank.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
agree.
another opportunity too, to talk about clients, when they should sell, when they should not sell, what are your circumstances? And it's also a good opportunity to see right now homes that are in your neighborhood that are not being snow plowed right now, that have I got a neighbor, not right now, down the block of mine, that I know the house has been foreclosed on. I know it's vacant, and I'm trying to contact the bank because I who knows who's handling the property for them? No one. And
Yeah,
Okay, that's a good point.
yeah, great point.
Good point, Jay.
Thank you, Jack. We appreciate it. Jack's got a huge amount of experience in foreclosures and short sales. We've got another question from Linnell. Linnell asks, she's got herself on mute, but she wanted me to read her question. She has several buyers anticipating a significant drop in home prices because of COVID. Because these buyers are anticipating an increase in foreclosure, or because we're anticipating an increase in foreclosures and short sales next year, would you suggest you instruct your clients to wait for these phantom price drops? I've got an opinion on that, but I'd love to hear your guys too.
It's a great question. I think that's a tough one. I think if the next stimulus bill includes that $15,000 first time buyer, I think that's going to keep fueling the market. I think, as a lot of you have already pointed out, I think it's going to be a different type of foreclosure cycle than we saw before. I don't think there's going to be a ton of homes, and as Adam points out, most of them do. If there's an ability, they do a workout on these things, and I think lenders and the government's going to be as incentivized as ever to make sure they avoid going to a foreclosure sale. So I think that's a tough one. I think there's a chance. I think it's like, hey, if you would have told me back in March that it was going to be a great year for home sales with the COVID and everybody, I'd be like, no way, come on, you're crazy. And obviously I didn't know what I was talking about, because it was a very good year. And it was a very competitive year for buyers. So I think that's a tough one. I wouldn't guarantee it. Let's put it that way. What do you think, Nick?
So, here's my take on it is I believe that this year prices are going to stay high, or stay on the increase. I shouldn't say high, stay, at the levels they're at and slowly trickle up based on the inventory, the lack of inventory, based on the strength of right now, even the stock market, despite COVID, but mostly because of these interest rates. So, the idea that there's not going to be, we've all said, there's not going to be a massive glut all at once of foreclosures or short sales. They'll actually maybe just even out the market in terms of inventory. The danger is if you wait till next year, and I've been saying this to a lot of my clients. First of all, we were telling people last year, well, maybe there'll be a dip in prices. And with what happened, instead, the prices have gone up. And in the meantime, if the prices don't go down, or even if they do go down somewhat and interest rates go up, your buying power will be no more, and potentially even less if the interest rates go up. That's the big danger. So you really only had two huge opportunities in the market over time: a true crash like 2008, 9, and 10, where it was the overall economy, the credit freeze, the banks weren't lending, and nobody knew what to do. And then the other big opportunity is a massive interest rate drop, and they're at about as low as they can go without the banks taking a loss on a loan. So you've really got to figure out, do you want to roll that dice and hope for a substantial drop in prices, which right now we're not seeing the warning signs, or are you going to stay more into a well, if the prices go down a little bit and the interest rates stay low, that's the time to buy, or should I start looking now and see if I find a place knowing that I want to buy and hold it? So that would be my prediction on it. And actually, Linnell had a great follow-up question too. If for investor clients who flip or in general, what are the first indicators of a price drop, of dropping prices in the market?
I mean, I think one of the indicators, if you start seeing a lot of foreclosures filed, is probably one of them. I think you're right about interest rates going up. You know, I think
here's my take on the interest rates. Here's a thing. Just let me listen. If the GSEs are still paying the mortgages that are in forbearance, because they're paying them to the investors, correct? They're paying them to the funds and the investors that own those loans that have been sold off by the GSEs. So in a sense, there's going to be, if they're continuing to make these payments to these investors, isn't it going to have some kind of an effect on the GSEs issuing new mortgages? And will those new mortgage rates, interest rates, be higher? Will they look at qualifications more strictly?
I'm sorry, what is the GSE
coming up?
I'm sorry, what is the GSE?
Huh?
What is the GSE? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
It's government-sponsored enterprise, and that means Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Yeah, Fannie and Freddie. So Fannie, Freddie, and FHA I throw in there too. So those banks are going to have. I think that if they're getting money, paying off the investors on the bad loans, then that means they're going to have less money, or be more concerned about lending in the future to new buyers. And I think eventually that's going to have an effect on interest rates. That's just
I'll comment to that too. Oh, are we still good?
I'm sharing my screen to show you something as soon as you guys are done, but I think you guys got interrupted, so please go ahead and finish.
Oh, I would say that. Oh, Jack, I was going to say that another interesting point to all this is right now, and they've been talking about this last decade, Fannie and Freddie are looking to go out of conservatorship and back into, private market. So, I mean, there's other things that play with Fannie and Freddie than FHA. And a lot of the feds are indicating that interest rates are going to go up and continue to go up. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So, and all these other things are going to play in. But right now it's, typical supply and demand. There's so little inventory. Will there be such a rush of foreclosures into the market and REOs that it's going to take care of that inventory issue? I don't know to be that extent, but so I'm not sure. But I do think that rates are going to go up, and that the market eventually, it seems like it's high right now in certain parts of the country, and I think eventually it's got to level out or start going back down. It just seems like it's been kind of crazy, but I don't know, when that's going to happen. I think this year they'll remain high, like Nick said.
Yeah, just from being, going through the credit crisis that we had last time, I was actually an account executive for a large subprime lender, Morgan Stanley, their subprime division before title. And the credit, what happened after that? Credit just dried up. So I mean, eventually credit parameters are going to get a little bit harder, I think, just from my personal opinion, if it kind of curtails to what happened last time. Rates are going to go up a little bit, so this is probably the best time to do anything, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I want to show you guys, I'm sharing my screen now. This is a report from List Reports. You can set up a free report from them. It's not always the best information here that's super local. You get from Illinois Realtors. I share that every month, the stats on market inventory, time on market, etc. But this was the national for last year. You get that at the local level. If you're a CAR member, you get those weekly and monthly stats. These are the things to look for. Is the volume dropping in existing homes month over month? Is the number of active listings going up month over month? Those are going to be the two numbers that are going to start to concern me, along with market time. They're going to drive down prices should any of what Jack And the expert panel from Codillis is talking about, because these guys are in the know, all three of them. Jack's doing the research too. We'll continue to update you if we see freezing up in the markets, things like that. Because again, 2009 and 10, we saw it, didn't know what it even was. Fortunately now we know as a result of that what that looks like. But these are the numbers for you as agents. Start looking at, our inventory moving up and down or down for the month. If it's moving up, that's a warning sign. If home sales volume is down, that's a warning sign. Contracts written down, that's a warning sign. Days on market going up, that's a warning sign that's going to lead you to say to your investors, to your flippers, etc., that is a potential for these prices to go down. So you need to be watching interest rates and all that. And we will, if you're at Exit Strategy, we're going to be keeping you up to date on that. You've got a good panel experts and people there. I've got one question real quick for Bill from Strategic Title. And I think some of you guys know that I have a ownership share in Strategic. So, obviously I love hearing from them. For those of you guys that are agents that work with Strategic, Bill, are you able to pull like distressed property reports, things like that for them of maybe, some of the foreclosure filings in certain areas, a targeted area?
We have, for Strategic, I have some information through Title Pro, it's called. It's actually powered by Black Knight, which Adam was mentioning earlier tonight. So it gives you a lot of data across the country and also locally of properties that are in pre-foreclosure.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions for the group as far as questions versus comments? Because I do want to go ahead and get into, I'm going to answer, Linnell, I'll answer your question in a second too. Any other questions, type them in the chat box. Linnell's question, this goes back kind of like what John's question was about realtors' ability to get something or a buyer's ability to get something off the market as a foreclosure. I know the answer, but I'd love to have our experts answer that too. Gentlemen?
Was the question, Nick, is there any way to find out right after foreclosure's been filed? Is that, because I saw it come across the screen?
No, the question is, can you get access to, or can you get the property while it's still off market? Like, remember when they used to have the tapes and things like that, all that stuff that doesn't happen anymore. What's the
I didn't want to unmute myself because my kid, she's over here being a little nuts. So like say for instance, I have a buyer, but she keeps sending me like foreclosure. So one home like actually just went into foreclosure. I see the bank just took it over. She wants to purchase it. So I wanted to know if there was any way to get like first dibs on it before they actually like listed it on MLS or anything.
So one thing with this, a lot of this data that people are finding, and just one thing with the foreclosure process in general, a lot of times, like, I'm not sure, there's all different lists of data, but they're able to track when a loan goes into default, 30 days past due, 90 days, all that. A lot of these aren't actually even filed foreclosures yet or in foreclosure. And once they actually are filed foreclosures, the bank doesn't own the property until it's gone all the way through the foreclosure and the order of confirming sale has happened in the court. So what happens a lot of times is people see, these properties and they're stated that they're, in foreclosure or foreclosed, yet the banks they can't sell the property, they can't do anything. The person that still owns it is the borrower and the homeowner. So you can always try to get in touch with the actual borrower or homeowner and try to work something out with them or purchase a property, short sale and all that. As for when it actually does go through the process, depending on the amount of inventory, so if it makes it all the way through foreclosure and it's going to go to REO, sometimes there's a dark period there. And if it is in that stage of the process, sometimes we can help, direct an offer onto a certain, client or seller or whatnot. But, and a lot of times they're trying to sell these properties through auction platforms too, before they actually go to REO brokers, because the banks want to, they want to get rid of these as quickly as they can. The longer they hold them, the more cost for them. If they have to pay an REO broker to sell them, that's more cost to them. So I guess to answer your question is it depends on where it's at in the process. As for like tapes and notes being sold, that market is not as busy as it used to be. And the ones that are being sold, since there's so much less inventory, they're being sold to really large groups that are paying very high dollar amounts on the, you know, the loan to value ratio. So I've heard some as high as like 80, 90%, where, you know, you're buying these loans and the value of the properties, you know, you have very little room there where, you know, you'd really have to buy at scale for that to even make sense. So it doesn't mean that that's not going to come back in some sorts if there really was a lot of excess inventory. But I think there's less interest in selling the notes too, because the property values are high and there's a lot of equity. So
Yeah, and one last comment to look now. I think most large institutional lenders have procedures in place that they either say you have to list it or you have to put it through an auction platform. If you deal with a local bank, if it's a foreclosure on a local bank, they may be more willing to talk to you about selling it to you before it gets listed with a broker. But with more of the national banks, they've got kind of they're a little more sophisticated than they were in the subprime where they would do that stuff. For the most part, they're going to want to either have it go through, like Adam points out, the auction program first, and then it has to be listed, and I need 3 comps, I need this, I need that.
And we're also, one more point to that, we're more regulated now than ever. I mean, pre this last crash, 2008, you know, banks were overwhelmed. They didn't have the right systems in place. They weren't expecting what had happened. Since then, you know, there's been a whole bureau enacted, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There is so much regulation. We have regulators in our office and clients every week. So there's a lot less of that kind of stuff going on. There's a lot more of these processes that need to be followed, like especially for the bigger banks, like Greg said, and a lot less of that kind of, you know, stuff that is going on. Even if it's private loans or whatever, these servicers, banks, anybody's in this space now, it's so heavily regulated. It's kind of hard to take it off the normal rails. So
whatever happened to the scattered sites that were the auction sites where before?
Oh yeah.
Where
I think those have mostly gone online. I think they're out. You're right. They used to have like an auction room, and they'd have 50 property. Yeah, I think most of those now are done just through the internet, through like auction.com website.
you're an investor, you could bid on those properties, but more than likely, most of those properties go back to the lender anyway because they're underbid.
Right. They don't. Right. They don't
yeah,
have
well,
the
that's something too that you might see different around this crash compared to the last. I think that there's a lot more savvy investors, and I think that you're going to see a lot more properties going third party, meaning that they're going to be sold in the foreclosure at auction. There's more risk to investors purchasing that way. You know, there's different types of guarantees that you're getting in buying a property that way versus if you buy it in REO versus if you buy it on a regular transaction. As you guys know, there's different warranties involved in different ways that you purchase. But what we're seeing right now, probably because there's so little inventory, I think it's up to like 75 to 80% of properties nationwide. And we're able to report this at all 5 of our law firms we're seeing are going third party, meaning they're selling in the foreclosures to investors because there's so little inventory. People are doing, whatever they can to get property. So I think that might continue through this, where you're going to see people that it used to be a lot smaller amount of people back in the last crash that were savvy enough and had the resources enough to buy at these actual foreclosure auctions. Now I think you're going to see this crash a lot more going third party, which may result in less REOs overall, which would be not as good for REO brokers or my firm, for example, that we do the legal and title representing, on the REO transactions.
Yeah. I want to make one more comment, and then we're going to move in to the Zillow and data discussion. We went way over on what we thought we'd be time-wise for our Codillas friends. We really appreciate them being here tonight and the discussion, and we will continue more discussions, because obviously there's some great topics here. The one final note I want to make is that as far as what I've been talking to 2 different local banks, as far as their inventory, they have made the comment they are following the national banks the same way that the short sale procedures are coming up, that they want it on the open market, whether that's through an auction that's also in the MLS, or whether that is straight up in the MLS through an REO broker, because they want the best market value, because they know the market is strong enough to get a good market value because of the inventory and because of the lack of inventory in the general market. So guys, don't waste your time too much with trying to figure out how to find these magic properties, go and talk to property sellers in distress and create that market for yourself, get the listings of the short sales, but realize you will also have to put it on the open market. Even if you have the buyer, you're going to have to put it on the open market. And just like John earlier mentioned, you can't in almost any situation get a commission as a buyer of a foreclosure property, like I tried 2 years ago and spent all that time researching that. Also, as a short sale agent, if you represent both the buyer and the seller, most banks will not allow you to have both sides of the commission. Can I find that law? No. Do I have time to fight it? No. I'm going to go out and prospect for more business. We are moving on now, guys, to the Zillow and data discussion. This is, and Cadilla's friends, if you guys need to get off the line, no worries. If you want to stay on, you can feel free to. This is a, and thank you guys again. That was awesome.
Thank you.
That contributed, John, Linnell, Jack. I appreciated that. The Zillow and data discussion. Some of you guys may have heard some of this before. I've got my screen share on again. This is what I want to focus on with that, is that just a quick overview, because again, we internally as an office talked about this. What is ShowingTime? It is one of the ways that you can schedule showings through the MLS. It also works with HomeSnap, but there's going to be some interesting things coming up with HomeSnap that I'll discuss with you in a second. What data does it have? Very little data. It has the data on showings, but it doesn't have any sort of data, additional data on the owner of the property than tax records, et cetera, doesn't have. So a lot of people that were concerned about, oh my gosh, they're, Zillow's going to have my data. Either they probably already have the data of your property based on item 2 here, because they've already got a direct feed to most of the MLSs. They've got the property tax data that's public record. And then they've got consumer information on most of the consumers out there, because they're the #1 portal. And your consumers, your buyers and sellers have probably filled out information with them too. So I just want to give you a little overview on this and tell you not to panic. And there's going to be some potential changes as well. Data doesn't mean a relationship, because that is also something that you have a lot of data, or hopefully are building data in your CRM. If you're at Exit, we give you our CRM for free. You've got to be not only having the data, but using it. And Zillow, even whatever data they have, when was the last time you heard a Zillow, prospect for someone trying to be a realtor? You don't get a lot of information or prospecting from Zillow, because they're really trying to get the advertising from you. You have more information on your people than Zillow does. You can enhance your data as well, get more information to build a better relationship. Don't just rely on that monthly e-newsletter. Be a sponge of their information. Leverage our events if you're at Exit. Make sure you're building those relationships fully. And remember also, data is sold everywhere, not just with Zillow. Facebook connections, your clients, and probably you. I know sometimes that's log in with Facebook to a third-party app. I've logged in there. I got the Starbucks Reserve card the other day, gave them a bunch of information. Well, that data can be sold, breached, et cetera, as well. Be careful with your data, but realize, unfortunately, it's being sold, shared everywhere. Also, alternatives. This is where I'm going to expand a little bit from last time. Showingly, ShowMojo are alternatives for agents if you don't want to use ShowingTime. The problem is you've really got to get your local MLS to adapt it, because otherwise you're telling people to go through a third-party app or service that they probably don't have access to and the local MLS hasn't used. Our local MLS is looking at alternatives. And also I've got this cursor here to simply add this to my notes, HomeSnap, which our local MLS loves. Most of the other local MLSs also have relationships with HomeSnap. HomeSnap is looking to build their own showing app, which our local MLS and many others are looking into as well as an alternative, if they decide the ramifications of the Zillow acquisition of ShowingTime make that a product that now has some issues. So wanted to give you a little bit of updates from that. HomeSnap, I think, is going to be a major player pretty quickly, because they've had such huge agent integration, not only in our MLS, but in other MLSs across the country. And remember, I think our local MLS board, I am what do they call participating owner in that. So I get a lot of the updates. They are going to be filling us in more as they decide if this is truly a nefarious takeover. Remember, your overall relationship with Zillow, they are making more money off of us as agents. For those of you that haven't looked at their stock reports, look where their revenue comes from. The majority of their revenue comes from not as an iBuyer, they've lost money on that. Not as a brokerage, they've lost money on that in the few areas that they're trying to sell their iBuyer stuff themselves. They are making the vast majority of money off you as agents, selling you advertising. So therefore, they would be fools to take that away by trying to compete with you. I know what they're going to do. They're working on doing a very similar relationship with you that Realtor.com is doing through Op City, where Zillow already is a brokerage in one state. They're going to sell leads to agents on the back end through a referral system, which we've already been a part of that pilot program, Zillow Broker Flex 1.0. We were part of that as our office. We're hopefully going to be soon in 2.0. Redfin kind of set the pace for that, where they said, hey, we got stuff, we got leads, we want to sell them to agents. We know nobody will pay on the front end, especially in a market downturn. We make more money on the back end through the closed referrals. We also get a better relationship with the consumer because the consumer feels like Zillow actually pushed the agent to do a good job through the reporting screens throughout the deal. So expect more of the same, by the way. Remember, Zillow already owns Dotloop. DocuSign, there's been rumors about they may be sold. CRMs can be sold. You know, brokerages can be sold, not ours. You're stuck with me. But that is just overall. Don't panic about this kind of stuff, guys. There are alternatives being looked into. There's vendors racing to create and better their alternatives to ShowingTime. And, you know, the local boards are really looking into it. Carr issued a statement you may have seen over the weekend as well. So thank you guys very much for being here today. I appreciate this. If you're not at Exit, we'd love to talk to you. If you never want to come to Exit, we will still be inviting you to all our events. Money Mondays, once a month, will be open to the public for the realtor industry. And just like we do consumer events open to all of our clients. We thank you for being here tonight. Thank you all the Exit agents. This was a good turnout. Have a good one.